Thank you. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I made the drive up here from Columbus, Georgia, just earlier this morning because of the barbecue. Let's just be honest. I heard a lot of good stuff about it. No, actually, Chaplain Chad Cottle and I go back a long ways, and when I saw this video, it just blew me away of what the Lord did through that chaplain and through OR. So I really consider it an honor to be here. I'm going to try to answer for you. I'm going to give you the long answer to the number one most often asked question that I got while I was in the Army. Now, I got about 3 questions that regularly got asked to me, but by far, the number one question, people who saw my uniform and recognized my last name from the movie Black Hawk Down and then saw that I was a chaplain, did the double take. And they said, are you the same guy? And if you ask that question to my wife or my children, they don't even let you finish the sentence. They say, yes, that's the same guy. They say, are you the same guy that was in Black Hawk Down and are now an Army chaplain? And the number one question that I got asked those last 10 years in the Army is, what happened to you? How did you go from Black Hawk Down to being an Army chaplain? And the short answer is one word. It's Somalia. Now I'm going to give you the long answer. Because when I tell people Somalia, and I know what they're thinking. They're thinking, oh, he got shot at, he got scared to death, and he found religion while he was in battle. And what I usually tell people, when I get a chance to tell audiences, is no, it's actually the exact opposite. So you heard just a little bit about my background. I won't go through the whole Army spiel with you. You don't want to hear that from me tonight. But I do want you to hear a pivotal moment where God moved my life in a direction that I would have never considered in a million years. And I'm doing what I'm doing today, and I love it. But if you would have told me that I'm doing this as a young guy, as enlisted guy in the Army's Ranger Regiment, I would have laughed in your face. Now, when I joined the Army, you heard I was 18 years old. I was still in high school. But I need you to know I was already a very committed Christian. I didn't grow up in a Christian home. In fact, my parents never went to church. I think the only time I ever remember as a child going to church with my parents is for a funeral. And when I was 13 years old, my next door neighbors came to talk to me. They were a young couple, newly married. Were living right across, we were in an apartment complex, and they were living right across the hallway from us. And they just started to treat me like a little brother. They wanted to hang out, wanted to spend time together. One night, they came across the hallway, knocked on my door, and asked if they could sit down and talk to me. And I still remember this. This is a long time ago, y'all. But I remember how nervous this couple looked. They were acting really weird. And they said, Jeff, hey, can we talk to you for just a second? Because there's something on our mind. And I thought, what's wrong with these two? So I listened to their story. And for the first time in my life, 13 years old, this young married couple from next door explained to me who Jesus was. I'd never really heard the gospel before. So this is the first time ever that somebody told me what sin was. And the first time ever that somebody described for me what Jesus did for me on the cross. But they made a statement. They didn't know me well enough to know just how powerful that statement was. They said, Jeff, if you will surrender your life to Jesus Christ, He will totally clean you up and do away with all of the consequences for that sin. He will guarantee your eternity in heaven. But if you will get serious about it right here, right now, He will also radically change you and give you not just eternal life, He will give you abundant life. He will change your life right now, and you don't have to worry about what happens to you after you die. They couldn't possibly know that from my earliest memory, I really struggled with the fear of dying. And I mean, this happened not once, but many, many times that I would wake up in the middle of the night and totally terrified about dying. Have no idea what happens to you after you die, so I'd wake up my family at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, And I'd ask them the same questions over and over again. Hey, where do you go after you die? And what is it like? And who gets there? And my family weren't Christians, so I got the same answer every time. And the answer just didn't really satisfy me, because here's basically what my family believed. You go to heaven, where everybody sits on a cloud and plays a harp. And by the way, everybody gets into heaven, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, so go to bed, Jeff. Leave me alone. And that answer, I must have woken them up 100 times, struggling with the idea that I know it's going to end one day. It's going to end for everybody, and I don't have the first clue what happens to you after you die. So really, I think God orchestrated the conversation that this couple would look me in the eyes at 13 years old and say, Jeff, we want you to know what happens to you after life ends here on planet Earth. And they were so nervous, they were so scared, that they basically just kind of left it with that and said, hey, if you're serious about this, here's what to do next. And then they ran away and ran next door because they were really nervous, y'all. And later on the night, that very night, I started thinking about what this couple said. And for the first time in my life, it made sense. And I don't even remember what I said, but late at that night, instead of getting up and waking up my family, I got out of bed, I knelt by the side of the bed, and I just simply prayed a desperate prayer of faith, like, God, I don't want to live with this kind of fear anymore. God, I need what this couple just described. God, I'm asking you to change me. And the next morning when I woke up, something was very different inside of my heart. In fact, I was in high school and went to school the next day. And when I got off the school bus to go home, instead of going to my apartment, I went to the neighbors and knocked on their door and said, I did what you guys described last night, and something is different inside of me. What do I do now? I'm telling you this because I'm 18 years old. I'm in an Army recruiter's office, and I have no idea about the military. I don't even know why I'm there, except my buddy kind of twisted my arm to get me in the recruiter's office. I'm still in high school, and I simply ask a question. Now, I'm the only guy in the room with 2 Army recruiters that have a quota to make, so I'm like a piece of red meat in front of 2 wild dogs. And I asked the recruiters, hey, what's the toughest job in the Army? And I'm sure in the back of their mind, they're thinking, this guy is an idiot and completely gullible. Let's see if we can get him to sign up. The one guy across the room, he yelled out, it's the Army Special Forces. Green Berets are the toughest guys in the Army. And the recruiter that I was talking to, that at the desk that I was standing in front of, said, he doesn't really know anything about he doesn't know what he's talking about. The Army Rangers are without a doubt the toughest guys in the Army. And I didn't know anything about the Army, didn't know Special Forces, didn't know Army Rangers. So I just asked this recruiter, what's the difference between Army Rangers and Green Berets? And he said, well, let me explain it to you this way. True story, and this is his explanation. If we were to take you to the Gateway Arch in St. Louis, Missouri, and let's say that we take a group of Rangers and a group of Special Forces, a Special Forces Alpha team, about 12 guys to the Gateway Arch, and a Ranger squad, about 9 or 10 guys, to the bottom of the Gateway Arch at the same time, and we tell both groups, we want you to get to the top of the Gateway Arch. Let me tell you what Rangers are going to do, Jeff. They're going to do at the Gateway Arch exactly what they did on June 6th, 1944 at the cliffs of Pointe du Hoc in Normandy, France. They're going to take grappling hooks and knotted hand lines, and they'll throw it over the top of that Gateway Arch, and they will just climb hand over hand all the way to the top. That's what Army Rangers are going to do. Special Forces guys, on the other hand, will realize that there's an elevator. They'll just run inside, hit the top floor and the elevator button, and wait for the Rangers to get to the top. That's the difference between Rangers and Special Forces. But he did say, I want to make sure you know what you're getting into, because you're asking for the toughest assignment in the Army. Are you sure that's what you want to do? And I signed up while I was right there in that recruiter's office to go try out and to serve as an Army Ranger. Now, I didn't tell the recruiter this, but I had an ulterior motive. God miraculously dealt with this fear of dying at 13 years old when I knelt by the side of my bed, and he took that fear of dying away, and I never really struggled with it. So when I went to the recruiter and I asked him the toughest job, what I was really trying to figure out is, what's the job that puts me in the greatest possible chance of going to combat, getting shot at, and finding out if I'm really over the fear of dying? You heard just a second ago about my story. Joined the Army at 18, went straight to the Ranger Regiment, showed up there as a private. I've been there for a couple of years. I'd gone through the Army's Ranger School, got promoted to the rank of sergeant, and the U.S. was getting ready to invade the Republic of Panama, December 1989. I was a sergeant serving in the reconnaissance detachment, and I got notified about 4 days before the invasion began that the United States was about to invade. We were going to start the invasion by my unit, the Rangers, conducting 2 parachute assaults onto airfields. We were going to seize those 2 airfields, and then all of the rest of the invasion force would fly in and land on those 2 airfields. We knew that there was a high probability that some of our aircraft in the skies that night might get shot down, and we needed a search and rescue force for the night of the invasion. So I loaded up on an airplane in secrecy, flew down to Panama 24 hours before the invasion began, and provided this search and rescue force for the first night of Operation Just Cause. From there, the Rangers and the rest of the special operators that we served with, we were first supposed to defeat the Panamanian Defense Forces. That didn't take long. But the real mission was go get the country's leader, Manuel Noriega, capture him, and send him back to the United States to stand trial. So after about a week or so of flying around the country, getting shot at, getting in firefights, we started to track down Noriega. It was like the hunt for Elvis. That's basically what we called it. And 2.5 weeks into this thing, we'd captured Noriega, put him on an airplane, and flew him back to the United States. And I was on an airplane heading back to the U.S. And I got shot at a time or two while I was in the invasion of Panama. But it didn't feel like life or death to me. To be honest with you, it just seemed pretty cool. It was a lot of adrenaline, a whole lot of action, a lot of time with no sleep whatsoever, days on end with no sleep, but I didn't feel like this was life or death. So the real reason why I joined the Army, became a Ranger, I still didn't have an answer to that thing. I did learn one thing when I was in Panama, though. It made me start to think about the girl that I met in high school, that I had this long distance relationship with, and I decided, you know what, if I do nothing else right, I'm going to go buy a ring and ask this girl to marry me. And so right after getting back from Panama, I flew back to our hometown and I proposed, and Dawn and I set a date to get married about a year later. Now some of you out there know the history, so you know a year later the U.S. is involved in Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm. We're about 6 or 8 weeks away from our wedding day. You know, we've taken care of all of the details, just about ready to get this thing, all of it put together. Well, you know how it is, guys. She's taking care of all the details. I'm like, whatever you want to do, doesn't matter to me. I just want to get married. And I get notified by my commander that we're about to go overseas. Now, this is before the internet. So I convinced my boss to let me make a phone call on an unclassified line, a regular phone line, to my fiance. And the phone call basically went like this. Dawn, I can't tell you where I'm going. I'm not authorized to tell you when I'm leaving, and I don't know when I'm going to get back. But I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be in the country on our wedding day. And after all of those plans and all of that preparation, there was a long pause on the phone. And she said, Jeff, if you're going to war again, you better fly home and we better get married right away. And I said, first of all, this is an unsecure phone line. Nobody said anything about going to war. I just said I won't be in the country. She said, don't mess with me, Jeff. If you get killed, I want the flag. If you're going off to war, we need to get married. And I said what any smart guy in this group tonight would say to a beautiful woman like this. I said, yes, ma'am. And I got on a plane and I flew home. I landed in our hometown about noon. Later on that afternoon, we were getting married, and I got back on a plane, flew back to Georgia, and then went off to Kuwait. Got shot at in Kuwait too. But it was nothing like what happened in Mogadishu, Somalia. And by the time that I went to Somalia, I was a 24-year-old squad leader. I had 10 men that I was responsible for, and I had a lot of combat experience. And when people hear about my story from Somalia, I'm really convinced that they think that guy got shot at and he got scared and he got religion while he was over there. But it's actually the opposite. See, I was trying to share my faith with Army Rangers. I was buying pizza with my own money and doing Bible studies at lunchtime, just hoping that guys would show up and eat something that wasn't made in the chow hall and talk about Jesus. But most Army Rangers, like Special Forces guys, are just tough men. Really smart, really competent, really strong guys who gave basically the answer, Jeff, I don't need you. I don't need Jesus. I don't need anybody because I've got where I'm at all on my own. And as I tried to share my faith in Jesus, those guys just didn't want to hear it for a long time. And I go to Somalia. Everybody knows about my faith because I'm really open about it as a sergeant in the Army. And I love being an Army Ranger. In fact, for many years, I felt like God made me and put me on planet Earth to kick in doors and to kill bad guys and to win America's wars. That's what he created me to do. And I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. And love Jesus at the same time. So I'm in Somalia. I've got 10 men that I'm responsible for, and generally speaking, my job is to be on those Humvees every time the Special Operations Task Force does a mission in Somalia. And I'm going to tell you a little North Carolina history. We have this big joint exercise that's going on in the summer of 1993. People are aware of what's going on in Somalia. They have seen the Marines landing on the beaches in December of 1992 and opening up the supply lines and providing food to the starving people of Somalia. They've seen how the situation is deteriorating. They've seen how U.S. supply convoys are getting blown up on the road and how U.S. helicopters are getting shot at by the Somali militia. And the United States has been gradually escalating the combat operations in Somalia. And by the summer of 1993, the international news is starting to associate Somalia with Vietnam. Literally, they're saying, is this another Vietnam? Is that what we're doing right now? And President Clinton is getting hammered in the news about his policies in Somalia. The whole Joint Special Operations Task Force, guys from all across the U.S. military in all different branches of service, we're in Texas training together out in the desert of West Texas. And a handful of us get a phone call that says, stop what you're doing, leave all of your equipment in Texas and fly to North Carolina. We'll tell you what you're going to do when you get to North Carolina. We get to North Carolina, go to a training facility out in the middle of nowhere, and they say, hey, it's time for you guys to go over to Somalia and to fix the problems over there. And the problem is that there's a rebel warlord that is attacking United Nations and United States forces and murdering them in cold blood. And we want you to go over there and put an end to this. We're training and getting ready to go to Somalia. And then out of the blue, got a phone call that said, you know what, it's not going to happen. Go back to Texas and go back to training. So we fly back across the country, go back to Texas. All of our buddies are saying, hey, what was that all about? And we're like, don't worry about it, no big deal. 12 hours later, get back on a plane, fly back to North Carolina because you're really going to Somalia this time. And eventually we land in Somalia, and our job is to go capture this rebel warlord, take him down, and take down the high-ranking leadership of his clan. Now, we conduct about 7 missions in Somalia. And these missions are getting gradually more violent. They're getting more daring. They're becoming more dangerous. But we're being pretty successful. We're just not capturing Mohammed Farah Aidid, this rebel warlord. We hadn't found him 3 months into this mission. We thought we would be there for 6 or 8 weeks. We're now 3 months into it. And we're getting a lot of pressure from the Clinton administration to wrap this thing up and to get out of there. We still hadn't found him or a couple of the really high-ranking leaders when we get this tip on Sunday afternoon, October 3rd. And I feel like I owe it to you to tell you, why on earth would special operators do what you guys just did on this final battle that becomes known as Black Hawk Down? Well, it's because two of these really high-ranking leaders are meeting in the same building at the same time. We've been tracking these guys all over town, and it's really hard to find them in any one place, let alone two guys meeting in the same building. They just happen to be in the very center of town that's controlled by this rebel warlord leader. And this is the broad daylight, middle of the afternoon, worst possible circumstances. We're the kind of forces that almost only do missions at night. But our commander, Major General William Garrison, decides to launch a mission to go get these two guys. So just like you see in Black Hawk Down, special operators fly in on Little Bird helicopters and assault the target building. Rangers from my company are going in on Black Hawks and sliding down ropes and putting Rangers at the four corners of the target building. And while all of that was going on, I was that lead Humvee in this long column of Humvees through the city streets. We were going to wait about a half a block away. When those special operators got done doing business inside, we'd grab all the bad guys and throw them on the Humvees. Then everybody else who went in by helicopter, jump on the Humvees, and we tried to get out of there in less than 30 minutes because we knew how bad this could get. The problem is, when the helicopters are flying in, when the Rangers were sliding down the ropes, one of those guys named Todd Blackburn missed the rope, and he fell 70 feet, and he landed in the city streets head first. So when I got to the target building, my commander, Colonel Danny McKnight, was calling me on the radio, saying, "Jeff, we got a really seriously wounded Ranger. I need you to get your men, put him on your Humvees, drive him back to the base, and get him immediate medical attention." Now, we were getting shot at already. It's pretty far over our head. I wasn't that really worried about enemy gunfire. I was more concerned about getting Todd Blackburn back to our surgeon. Because when I got to him, he was already unconscious. He was bleeding from his nose and his mouth. And I placed him on a stretcher on a cargo Humvee with a Special Forces medic working on him, trying to keep him alive. He had no protection around him, so I split my squad in half. Put half of my men on a Humvee in front of him, and the rest of my guys on a Humvee behind him, and now we were going to provide some guns that would protect him and get him out of the city and back to our base. We were getting shot at by enemy gunfire, and it really wasn't that, the gunfire wasn't that intense, and it really wasn't that accurate, but the roads were in really bad shape. So I'm in the first Humvee, and I told the guy who's driving my vehicle to drive really slowly and to try to avoid as many potholes as possible, so that Blackburn didn't have further injuries by bouncing up and down on the way to our base. I'll go through this part of it quickly, but we turned the corner onto one of these only major roads in Somalia. Right after we drove by the target building, turned onto one of the only major roads in that city. And when we did, that road is about as wide as this space here. And these three Humvees got hit with hundreds of automatic guns, hundreds of machine guns, rocket-propelled grenades, and gunfighters from point-blank range. I had a guy who was 18 years old on a 50 caliber machine gun on top of my Humvee, holding the trigger down and spraying bullets all over the place, trying to return fire. We're getting hit from everywhere. And he wasn't being very effective that way, so I told him to turn the machine gun to the left, face the left side of the vehicle, and pick up all of the bad guys to the left. Another guy was sitting right behind me with the machine gun, named Dominic Pillow, who is to this day the greatest machine gunner I've ever seen in my life. So I told Pillow to take his machine gun, face it to the right, pick up all the enemy fighters to the right. Another guy in the back seat would try to take care of all the bad guys in the rear. I had a weapon and I was in the passenger seat. I'll take care of everybody in front of us. Now what we're doing is just trying to keep each other alive because we're getting hit from everywhere. And it looks like we're not going to be able to make it back to the base. It looks like this is going to cost all of us our lives. Down the road on the right side of the Humvee, hiding, waiting for us, was a Somali gunman. And when we got right next to him, as close as that screen is from me, he saw Dominic Pilla at the same time that Pilla saw him. These two guys turned their weapons to each other at the same moment, and Pilla was shot in the forehead and killed instantly and fell over into the lap of Specialist Tim Moynihan. And then Moynihan begins to panic. This scene is depicted really well in Black Hawk Down. Moynihan starts to scream my name out. Sergeant Strucker, Pilla's been hit. He's dead. And when I looked over my shoulder, it was like the whole back of that Humvee just got painted red with Dominic Pilla's blood. And for the first time since I was 13 years old, I started to panic, thinking, I'm going to die. I'm going to die in the next few seconds. I'm not even going to make it back to our base. This is where my training as an Army Ranger kicked in, and I realized, Jeff, you're in charge here, and you have to get yourself under control if you're going to get your men under control. So very calmly, very deliberately, I told Tim Moynihan to take his weapon, face it the right side of the Humvee, pick up Dominic Pilla's sector of fire, and kill as many bad guys as possible if we're going to make it back to the base. When we get back there, the scene is total chaos. And I can't believe that I've even made it out of the city streets alive. I leaned over the hood of my vehicle and thought, God, there is no reason why I'm alive right now. I can't believe that any of us made it out of the city streets. Our vehicles are shot to pieces. Dominic Pilla's dead right behind me. The surgeon is rushing to get to Todd Blackburn. And I thought to myself, I can't believe that any of us just survived this. I was so busy fighting for my life that I didn't hear what was going on in the radio. So when I get back to the base, my boss walks up to me and he says, Jeff, a second Black Hawk just got shot down. I didn't even know the first one went down. He said, we've already put the search and rescue force in at the first Black Hawk crash site. We don't have anybody else who can go out to the second crash site where Mike Durant's helicopter crashed. Jeff, I need you to put your men back on your Humvee, and I need you to go out there and see if anybody's alive at the Durant crash site. One of the special operators who came back with me overheard the whole conversation. And he said, hey, Sergeant, if you're really going to go out in the city streets tonight, don't leave your men in the back of that Humvee sitting in all of that blood. He said, that's going to mess them up for the rest of their life. You probably need to go clean this Humvee up. Now, I sent all the rest of my guys, go get some more fuel, go get some more ammunition. We're going back out into the city streets. But I pulled this one Humvee off to the side, and we don't have running water, so I'm just using my bare hands and buckets and sponges, and I'm cleaning the blood off of the back of this Humvee, and I don't want to ruin your evening, so I'll spare you all of the gory details, but I will tell you this, without question, this is the most terrifying moment of my life. Because two things are going through my mind. One, I've just lost the only guy from the entire unit that's killed in action, just got shot inches from me. And if we go back out into the city streets, everybody is going to die. None of us will be around tomorrow morning. So I'm thinking about my men, but I'm also thinking about my wife. Because we've been married now for almost 3 years. We've been trying to have a baby for almost 3 years. And right after getting to Somalia, she sent me a letter in the mail saying that she was pregnant with our first child. And I'm thinking, I will never see my wife again, and my baby will grow up and never know who their father is. And everything inside of me was saying, don't do this, Jeff. It is a suicide mission. But if you know Army Rangers, if you know special operators, you know that we swear our lives to one another. Rangers do it every single day in the form of a Ranger Creed, and they mean these words. One of the stanzas of that Ranger Creed says that I will never leave a fallen comrade to fall into the hands of the enemy. And I'm standing at the back of this Humvee with all of this blood on my hands thinking, if I go out there, I'm going to die. If I don't go out there, Mike Durant is going to die. And I just finally came to the conclusion, okay, I'm going to go back out there, and God, I am scared to death. I just want somebody to hear this part of my story, because this is probably the most important thing you're going to hear from me tonight. I'm standing at the back of this Humvee and I start to pray. And it's not one of those, God, if you get me out of this thing, I'll do whatever you want me to do next prayer. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just praying, God, I'm in big trouble and I know I'm going to die. And there's no way out of it. And at that moment, he started to remind me of something. I went all the way back to 13 years old. He started to remind me, Jeff, you said that you trusted me with your soul when you were 13 years old. Did you really mean it? And if you did really mean it, Jeff, there's really only one of two ways that this thing is going to turn out tonight. Maybe by some miracle, I survive and I go back home to Fort Benning, Georgia, and to my wife and our baby that's on the way. But maybe I don't. Maybe I never see tomorrow morning. But if I die on the city streets of Mogadishu, Somalia, because of what Jesus Christ did for me on a cross a long time ago, I know exactly where I'm going to spend eternity. And folks, this is what I want you to hear. I came to the moment at the back of that Humvee where it just made sense like this to me. Either I go home to my family in Georgia, or I go home to my Father in heaven. But no matter what happens next, I can't lose. And that moment, something changed inside of me. In fact, from that moment forward, I was absolutely certain that I was going to die and had no fear whatsoever. I rolled back out into those city streets, not one, but two more times, spent all night long on those city streets in firefights, getting shot at, men killed all around me with total peace. And when I got back in the next morning, my friends who didn't want to hear me talk about Jesus were waiting for me. And they said, Jeff, I need to talk to you right now about what just happened last night. Jeff, I need to know, where is my best friend who just died? What happens to you after you die? Where do you go? What is it like, Jeff? The exact questions that I was asking my family as a boy, they're now asking me as an Army Ranger. And they were asking me, what happens if I get on a helicopter? What happens to me if I get on a Humvee and I don't come back alive? What happens to you after you die? And more than one of them looked me in the eyes and said, Jeff, you have something that I don't have. I watched it on the city streets. I heard it in your voice over the radio. When everybody else was in total terror, you were completely calm. How is that even possible? In fact, the guy who played me in the movie Black Hawk Down talked to a whole bunch of Rangers, and he said, Jeff, every one of them said the same thing about you. They all said that you were just totally calm in the middle of this. How is that possible? And I told him the answer is because I have this rock solid faith in Jesus Christ, a faith that's bigger than death. And so I just got to the point where if I'm going to die tonight, so be it. I know what eternity holds for me next. And folks, I can take you to the exact spot. I have never heard an audible voice of God, but I can take you to the exact spot where it was as clear as anything I've ever experienced in my life. On this airfield, the day after this firefight, where God started to poke me in the chest, and he started to say, Jeff, you have something that these guys don't have. And I want you to help them get ready. Not to meet the enemies of our country. That's what I've been doing as a sergeant for years in the Ranger Regiment. I need you to help them get ready for eternity because they're not ready. Which set me on the course to become an Army chaplain. Spent the last 10 years of my Army career here at Fort Bragg in the 82nd Airborne Division, and then all of the rest of it in the Ranger Regiment, going to Afghanistan and Iraq, looking guys in the eyes in the middle of battle and saying, I know exactly what you're going through. Been there, got the t-shirt. And I can tell you the difference when Jesus Christ is the center of your world. It makes all of the difference. I'm here tonight to tell you just how important this ministry is to the future of our country, as well as to some warriors whose lives are hanging in the balance. Because I'm on these battlefields and guys are saying, how am I going to live with myself after what I just did tonight? How am I going to ever make these dreams go away? And I still get phone calls today from people that I've never met before saying, Jeff, I don't even want to live anymore because of what I've done or what I've seen. And I just reached out to a guy who I thought may be able to help me because I don't know where else to turn. We've got some of the most amazing men and women in the ministry serving as military chaplains who passionately love Jesus, who love warriors and want to make a difference where it's the absolute greatest need. And most of those chaplains, in fact, any of them in their right mind would say, I need all the help that I can get because I'm in over my head. And anybody who loves Jesus and wants to help make a difference, come on, the more the merrier. So I'm here tonight to just basically talk to two groups of people. Maybe there's somebody here who's still wrestling with eternity. If that's you, can I just simply plead with you? Don't leave here tonight without settling this. Look, this isn't a church service. I'm not going to do an altar call. I'm just going to beg you. You are gambling with eternity. You're playing Russian roulette with eternity if you're not certain where you're going to spend eternity. So just nail it down right here tonight before you leave here. And for those of you who have kind of settled it and are saying, I really want to make a difference. I want to make a difference for guys like Bill, for guys and gals that are currently serving our country. I want to really make a difference. I think you have a chance to make a difference in ways that you may never know until you stand before Jesus and you see the eternal rewards of what Operation Rescue is doing as it partners alongside military chaplains. So if you're okay with it, I'm just going to close with a prayer, and then I'm going to turn things over to Mike. Can I pray for you? Father, I don't know most of the people in this crowd. I don't know what's going on in their life. I don't know what their struggles are. I don't know what their fears are, but you do. You know every one of them completely. You know what's going on in the deepest recesses of their soul. And God, maybe somebody's watching this online right now. Maybe they're sitting in a hotel room. Maybe they're in their living room and they don't know Jesus Christ as Savior. If tonight was the night that they were standing before him, they have no assurance that they're going to spend eternity in heaven. God, would you help that person to just simply nail this down right here, right now? I'm going to challenge them to pray a prayer of faith. There's no magic in these words. You know that, God. But if they come from a sincere heart, I believe that you hear it. I believe that you honor it. I believe that you can do a miracle and take a dead soul and make it alive through the blood and the resurrection of your Son, Jesus Christ. So I'm just praying that somebody would simply cry out a prayer that sounds like this. God, I am a sinner, and I can't get to heaven on my own. So tonight, I am turning from my sin, and I am turning to Jesus Christ for the first time. God, you know me. You know this is real. You know I mean it. And Father, I'm asking you to move in and take up residence. I'm asking you to change my heart, do something inside of me that I can't do for myself. God, would you change me and turn me into a new man? Change me and turn me into a new woman. I want what Jeff just described tonight. Father, if that prayer is real, if it's sincere, would you make this eternal difference in their life like you've made in mine, and not just mine, but in many billions of people around the world. Father, would you do for them what you did for me a long time ago at 13 years old? But I also pray for my brothers and sisters who are watching this or who are here tonight who claim the name of Jesus. God, would you give them this rock solid assurance? Would you give them the assurance that I have built my life on the solid rock, and no matter how bad the wind blows, no matter how much the waves smash against it, the foundation is solid. Jesus has got me in the palm of his hands, and so I will not fear what's happening to me right now. I will not fear what the future holds. I will just trust it in your hands, knowing that you are a good God, knowing that you've got it all under your control. And whatever happens to me next, God, I believe that it will be for my good and for your glory. So God, would you just have your way right now in this room and with those folks that are watching this online. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.